I've been thinking a lot about how music has shaped the way I process the world, especially during the harder parts of life. Since May is Mental Health Awareness Month, it felt right to talk about that. Not in a big dramatic way, just honestly, about the albums that became part of my story. Not because they were cool or popular, but because they found me when I needed something to hold on to. This isn't really about music criticism or favorite bands, it's about memory, about growth, about how sometimes the right song can say what you're not ready to say yet yourself. I don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring it out, just like everyone else. These albums helped me through the figuring. And if nothing else, maybe hearing about them will remind you of a few songs that helped you too. The first album I ever connected with wasn't some deep cut discovery or underground favorite. It was Elton John's Greatest Hits, 1970 through 2002. A CD that sort of just existed in the house. It was part of my parents' collection, I think. I was around 4 when I started playing it at night. No headphones, just cheap portable CD player crackling quietly on the nightstand. I don't remember what drew me in at first. Maybe the melodies, maybe Elton's voice, just being so dramatic and warm, almost like a storybook narrator. But what I do remember is how safe it made me feel. Around that same time, I was starting school, which for a kid is this weird emotional shift, going from the comfort of home into a world full of noise, structure, and new faces. There was anxiety there, even if I couldn't name it then. But when I came home, that CD would be waiting. At night, those songs were like a lullaby for my nerves. They were steady, familiar, calming. I played that album to death. Literally, it stuck with me all the way through elementary school and into middle school until one day the CD just stopped working. Too many spins, too many nights keeping me company when the rest of the house was asleep. Looking back, I think that was the first time I realized how much music could ground you, how it could become part of your routine, your sense of security. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a companion. It was something to hold on to when the world felt a little too big. If Elton John's Greatest Hits was the album that made music feel like a home to me, The Connection by Papa Roach was the first time music felt like a mirror. I bought it myself, the first album I ever owned that wasn't a gift or something my parents played. It felt personal before I even opened the case. I was around 11, and the world was starting to feel heavier than it should have at that age. That was the year I was diagnosed with depression. Didn't really have the language for it yet. Just a constant fog, a weight I couldn't explain to anyone. And here came this album, full of noise and urgency and songs that sounded like they were trying to hold things together. It wasn't subtle, and that's probably why it worked. Tracks like Before I Die and Leader of the Broken Hearts hit hard. They still hit hard. Not because I had lived through everything they described, but because they made those feelings real. They gave shape to what I couldn't say out loud. The frustration, the sadness, the confusion. And more than that, they made me feel less alone in it. This was the first time I understood that music could articulate pain, not just soothe it like Elton had done, but really sit in it with you, like someone screaming beside you to say, yeah, I get it. I'm still here too. It was also the beginning of my shift towards heavier music, more layered, more aggressive, but this wasn't rebellion, it was searching. The connection didn't just change my taste, it helped me process something I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. That something was wrong, and I needed music, not just to escape it, but to understand it. After the connection, an album came along called Diet for a New America by 58, and that album became my soundtrack for coping with bullshit that was going on in the world around me. Between 2015 and 2018, everything felt chaotic and overwhelming. From the rise of intense political division and social movements like Black Lives Matter gaining more national attention, to tragic events like the killing of Michael Brown and the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016, even ongoing global issues like the refugee crisis and climate change warnings hitting the headlines. It was a lot for a teenager to process. The news was grim and constant, and the world felt like it was spinning out of control. This album didn't offer false hope or easy answers. It voiced the frustration and anger bubbling beneath the surface in a way that felt real. Songs like Shopping Cart Jesus cut through the noise with blunt honesty about struggle and survival, giving space to scream against the nonsense of it all. It felt like a release valve for the helplessness that was hard to put into words. Killing Joke matched that energy with fierce intensity, capturing the chaos and tension that defined those years for me. Diet for a New America wasn't about sugarcoating reality or offering peace. It was about acknowledging the mess and somehow making it through anyway. It became my way to process the world's bullshit when it felt like there was no safe space to just feel that anger and confusion. That album helped me hold on to a raw, brutal clarity during some of the most turbulent years I ever remember. The downward spiral came into my life during one of the darkest chapters I've ever faced. I was reeling from the heartbreak of losing a relationship that had lasted 5 years. Something that had been my foundation for so long was suddenly gone. On top of that, I was wrestling with depression and a growing dependence on alcohol that felt like both a crutch and a trap. This album didn't offer comfort in the usual sense. Instead, it plunged me deeper into my own emotional whirlwind, reflecting everything I was feeling inside. The industrial, harsh soundscapes and haunting lyrics of tracks like Reptile and The Becoming cut through the noise of my mind, giving voice to the anger, confusion, and pain that I just couldn't bring myself to express. And in particular, dark art, music like this in particular, can be vital in helping people. It helps us confront and comprehend terrible events or truths. Sometimes light or uplifting music doesn't have the space to hold the weight of what we're going through. Albums like The Downward Spiral create a kind of emotional honesty, forcing us to face the raw, uncomfortable parts of life that we often try to avoid. Listening to this album was like staring into a mirror that showed me the shadowed parts of myself. It was a reckoning. It was painful, but it was necessary. It taught me that sometimes the path through darkness is the only path available, that music can be a guide through that journey. It gives shape to feelings that are otherwise hard to name. In this way, dark music doesn't just reflect pain, it helps us understand it, making the incomprehensible just a little bit more tangible. By the time I found the House of Golden Bones, I wasn't a kid trying to figure out who I was anymore. I was someone who had already been broken down a few times and was starting to build something back up. And that's why a song like The Travelers Part 1 hits me the way it does. There's a lyric that says, "It seems life is something more than a journey with no end. I just want to lose it all and find myself again. I'm on my own." That lyric isn't just poetic, it's painfully real. It captures that moment when everything feels so impossibly heavy, so uncertain that the only way forward seems to be burning it all down to the ground and starting over. And that wasn't just a story and a concept album. This is my life. I'm in the middle of untangling years of emotional wreckage, heartbreak, failed plans, and the aching questions of what now. The House of Golden Bones, both parts, become more than just music. It becomes a framework for how to think through change. The structure of the album mirrors that internal tug of war, two sides of the same self, fighting to define what comes next. It's about choice, sure, but more than that, it's about consequence, about what it takes to claw your way through the worst parts of yourself and not lose sight of who you were trying to be in the first place. The Traveler's Part 1 stands out because it doesn't offer an answer. There's no grand resolution or redemption, that's just the quiet admission. I'm on my own, and that's a hard truth, but also a freeing one. Because once you realize no one's coming to save you, you can stop waiting and start walking. This album didn't solve my problems, it still doesn't, but it helps me live inside them long enough to make sense of them, and maybe even to begin climbing my way out. By the time Last of the Real kicks in, you're no longer wandering, you're standing your ground. This is the moment in the album where defiance takes over, where the character, and maybe even you as the listener, realize That survival isn't just about endurance, it's about fighting back. This song hits me at a point in my life where I'm not drowning anymore, but I'm still soaked. I'm still tired. I'm still cynical, and I'm pissed off that everything has gone wrong at every point in my life. I'm not going to let it end there, though. Last of the Reel gives that frustration a soundtrack, a pounding riff, the venom in Corey Taylor's voice. It makes the rage feel purposeful. Like, yeah, life kicks the shit out of you, but that doesn't mean you have to stay down. What I love about this song is how it doesn't glamorize survival. It doesn't make some grand speech about hope or healing. It just says, I'm still here. I haven't sold out. I haven't turned into what the world wants me to be. And in a world where you're constantly being pushed to give up pieces of yourself, whether it's for comfort or approval or peace or just to make a living, that's a powerful message. For me, this isn't about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about clinging to what feels real, what feels true. I've lost relationships. I've burned bridges. I've questioned whether any of it mattered. But this song reminded me that there's still value in just being honest and staying grounded in who you are, even if that version of you is bruised and bitter and still figuring it out. Last of the Reel isn't triumphant, it's raw. And sometimes that's the closest we get to feeling alive. Looking back at the House of Golden Bones as a complete work, what stands out to me the most is how deeply human it is. Beneath all the metaphor and fury, it's a story about choice, about identity, about whether we become the person we're supposed to be or the version of ourselves we build out of fear. Across both albums, there's this constant tension between collapse and control, a voice in your head pulling you apart while you're trying to stitch yourself back together. And maybe that's why it resonates with me so much. When I first heard these albums, I was trying to put my life back in order. It had been stripped down to nothing. A long relationship ended. I'm trying to sober up, trying to make peace with a version of myself I didn't always like. What Stone Sour did with House of Gold and Bones wasn't just tell a story, he mirrored a struggle that a lot of us go through, but we don't have the language for. This feeling of standing at a crossroad where neither path feels safe and realizing the only way out is through. And in that sense, this album didn't just speak to me, it spoke for me. It gave shape to emotions I couldn't name. It made the chaos feel poetic. It reminds me that transformation, even when it's ugly and painful, is possible. That building something out of rubble is still building something. It's not a record that offers answers. And that's probably why it hits so hard. Because the questions about who we are and why we keep fighting don't go away. But albums like this make them a little easier to carry. So here we are. 5 albums, each one a chapter in a story that's still being written. Not just a story about music, but about survival, about change, about finding little pieces of yourself in sound, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. If there's one thing I've learned in all of my life so far, in heartbreak, in depression, in sobriety, in loss, it's that music isn't just background noise. It's a lifeline. It's a friend that doesn't talk back, but somehow knows exactly what you need to hear. It's proof that someone else, somewhere, felt what you're feeling right now and turned it into something beautiful. And since it's May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, I want to say this plainly. You're not alone. If you're struggling, if you're hurting, if you don't know what to do next, there is always help. In the United States, you can call or text 988 to connect with the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's free, it's confidential, and it's there 24/7. No shame, no judgment, just support from people who care and who are trained to help. I've leaned on music more times than I can count. I've leaned on people too. And sometimes you need both. And that's okay. Thank you for spending this time with me, for letting me share these albums and the pieces of myself wrapped up in them. If you connected with any of it, if it made you feel seen, or if it made you just want to revisit a song you haven't heard in years, that's more than enough. Until next time, take care of yourselves, be kind to your mind, and remember, healing isn't linear.